Poverty is not only measured in coin, but in perception. To look poor is to signal weakness, to display the scent of prey in a world of predators. Men respect strength, or at least the appearance of it, and they despise what reminds them of fragility. Even if your pockets are empty, your posture must remain unbroken. Even if your coffers are hollow, your presence must suggest hidden reserves. For power is not given to those who appear needy. It gravitates to those who seem self-sufficient. Beggars do not command armies, and paupers do not dictate policy. A ruler who dresses like a supplicant is treated like one, for the crowd confuses appearance with essence. The world is not ruled by truth. It is ruled by perception of truth. To look poor is to invite pity, and pity is the prelude to contempt. Men may give you crumbs when they pity you, but they will never entrust you with power. They may comfort you in words, but they will not follow you into battle. They will watch you starve and excuse themselves by calling it fate. If you have nothing, then conceal it. Let your silence weigh more than your confessions. Let your manner suggest that fortune is merely sleeping, not absent. The man who seems ruined is abandoned by allies. The man who seems unshaken draws them nearer, for men gather where the flame still burns. This is the cruelty of human nature. They prefer illusion over misery. They will adorn the impostor who acts rich and avoid the prince who admits poverty. The mask becomes stronger than reality, and reality bends to the mask. Therefore, you must clothe yourself not merely in fabric, but in dignity, not merely in garments, but in bearing. Even if your estate is barren, your words must sound as though spoken from a fortress. Even if your table is bare, your eyes must betray no hunger. For the world bows to the performance, not to the truth behind the curtain. Looking poor is surrender before the battle has begun. It is stripping your armor and handing your enemies the blade. Guard the theater of your life as jealously as the treasury of your state. For in the theater, men believe what they see, and what they believe becomes the law of your fate. And remember this, the world rarely grants the luxury of honesty to those who dwell at the bottom. A man who confesses his poverty invites chains, while a man who conceals it may yet climb to command. Poverty is not only an economic condition, it is a political danger, a crack in the armor through which enemies drive their blades. To reveal it is to teach others where you can be broken. To conceal it is to preserve the mystery that guards you. The city will always measure you by what it sees, not by what it cannot know. If your robes are torn, they will assume your mind is torn. If your purse is empty, they will believe your will is empty. They cannot distinguish between the hunger of your stomach and the hunger of your ambition, and so they will confuse the two. To them, the poor man cannot rule, because he cannot even command his own fortune. Thus they remove him from the stage, long before he has spoken his line. Appearances are armor. They are not truth, but they are the shield by which truth survives. Even generals without supplies carry themselves as if victory were already written. Even princes betrayed by fate must step into court as though fortune still bends to them. For if they falter in appearance, they falter in reality, and men scatter from the weak as birds scatter from a tree struck by lightning. It is not wealth itself that commands loyalty, but the illusion that wealth cannot be exhausted. A treasury may be empty, yet if men believe it full, they will still march under your banner. An estate may be mortgaged, yet if men see its gates proud and unyielding, they will still kneel at its threshold. But once you allow them to suspect ruin, once you allow the mask of abundance to slip, they will abandon you not because you have nothing, but because they fear becoming nothing alongside you. To never look poor is to wage war on the eyes of others. It is to discipline every gesture, every garment, every word, until nothing reveals desperation. It is to understand that the world hunts weakness with greater cruelty than it hunts crime. Men forgive the tyrant who appears powerful. They do not forgive the beggar who reminds them of their own fragility. In the theater of power, poverty is not a condition, it is a costume of defeat. So you must craft the opposite costume. Let your enemies whisper of your hidden resources. Let them wonder what alliances, what treasures, what weapons lie beyond their sight. Mystery itself is a form of wealth, for men imagine greater riches than you could ever display. and imagination often binds men more tightly than reality. The lesson is harsh, but it is eternal. To look poor is to die before the struggle has even begun. To never look poor is to keep the doors of fortune ajar, even when fortune herself has deserted you. A king without gold may still be obeyed, but a king who shows himself as poor is a king already dethroned in the minds of his people. And when you understand this, you will see that wealth is not merely possession, but projection. It is not the coin in the vault, but the certainty in the bearing. It is not the gold on the table, but the fire in the eyes of the man who sits at it. For men do not measure value with scales alone. They measure it with symbols, gestures, and the language of command. A torn sleeve whispers louder than a declaration of power. A broken shoe betrays more than a speech of confidence. One detail of poverty infects the whole image, and men, who are quick to judge and slow to forgive, carry that infection in their minds until it defines you. The wise understand that life itself is theater, and in theater, costume precedes belief. Actors do not wear crowns because they are kings. They are treated as kings because they wear crowns. The line between ruler and impostor is thinner than men admit, for perception completes what reality cannot. Thus, a poor man who refuses to look poor may command greater loyalty than a rich man who allows his wealth to appear unstable. It is not what you own that rules it, it is what others believe you own. Never mistake sympathy for respect. Men may pity your hardships, but they will not follow a banner that trembles in the wind. They will listen to your sorrow, nod their heads, and then retreat to the side of him who appears unshaken. Sympathy is soft and fleeting. Respect is hard and enduring. One vanishes when hunger rises, the other survives even when blood is spilled. To look poor is to trade respect for sympathy, and no man who rules can afford that exchange. And yet, to cloak yourself in appearances is not to lie, but to protect. It is to understand that truth, when naked, is too fragile to survive the eyes of men. Power must dress truth in armor, and that armor is appearance. Show poverty, and you invite chains. Conceal it, and you create room to maneuver, to recover, to rise again. A leader does not owe honesty to the crowd. He owes them stability. And stability requires illusion as much as it requires fact. Those who fail to understand this principle are destroyed not by their poverty, but by their display of it. They hand their enemies the weapon by revealing the wound. They hand the crowd the rope by confessing weakness. They collapse not because they had nothing, but because they showed it. The world does not forgive exposure. It feeds on it. Therefore, never look poor, even when your fortunes are crumbling. Let your enemies strike at shadows, never at your flesh. Let your allies believe the treasury still has reserves, even if you are counting the last coins. For as long as they believe, they will stay. And belief, in the end, is the foundation of power. Then understand this. The construction of strength begins not with wealth, but with discipline. The man who cannot command himself cannot command appearances. Poverty reveals itself first, in posture, in tone, in the restless movements of the desperate. Control these, and you have already begun to master the illusion. Stand as though you are unshaken. Speak as though time is your ally. Move as though the earth itself waits for you to decide. Desperation leaks through impatience. Conceal it with composure. The next fortress lies in symbols. Men cannot read your accounts, but they can read your attire, your dwelling, your gestures. A modest garment carried with authority is worth more than a golden robe worn with hesitation. A simple dwelling that feels impenetrable is worth more than a palace that trembles with decay. Power is communicated not by luxury itself, but by the command with which one wears it. A single ring on the hand can outweigh a treasury if it is displayed with certainty. Symbols are weapons. Wield them with precision. Then comes the art of narrative. Men hunger for stories more than they hunger for bread, and if you give them a story of your strength, they will eat it as though it were nourishment. Let whispers circulate of your resilience. Let tales spread of your hidden reserves. Let the crowd imagine that your silence hides strategy rather than emptiness. Narratives outlive numbers, and when the accounts are dry, the myth can still keep men loyal. A bankrupt man who is believed to be a strategist is far more powerful than a wealthy man believed to be a fool. But above all, Cultivate mystery. Poverty becomes visible only when it is exposed, and exposure comes when a man reveals too much. The poor speak often of their hardships, hoping for comfort, but every word deepens their humiliation. The strong speak little, and their silence becomes a veil through which others project greatness. Never explain, never justify, never plead. The less they know, the more they must imagine, and the imagination of men is a treasury you can draw from without end. In this way, you build a fortress of perception that shields you from the cruelties of reality. Even if fortune abandons you, even if betrayal strips you bare, the world will still kneel if you guard the mask. For power is not only what is possessed, it is what is believed. And belief, once secured, bends reality toward itself, reshaping fate to match the performance. This is why you must never look poor, even if you are, because the man who looks poor teaches the world how to treat him, and the lesson is never forgotten. The man who refuses to look poor, even in ruin, teaches the world to hesitate, to wonder, to fear. And hesitation, wonder, and fear are currencies stronger than gold. Loyalty itself is a fragile currency, and it is purchased not with truth, but with perception. Men are loyal to what they believe will endure. They will cling to the ship that seems unsinkable, even when the hull is cracked, and they will abandon the one that shows weakness at the first strike of the tide. To never look poor is to preserve loyalty beyond reason, for men would rather be deceived by confidence than enlightened by despair. Betrayal comes not when you are hated, but when you are judged weak. The ally who turns against you does so because he calculates that your ruin is certain. If you look poor, you give him the signal to betray, and betrayal spreads like fire in dry fields. But if you cloak yourself in strength, even when stripped to nothing, you force him to hesitate, and hesitation delays betrayal until you have rebuilt your defenses. Thus, appearances buy time, and in politics, time is more precious than gold. Fear, however, is the strongest cement. Men will forgive a leader's cruelty more easily than they will forgive his weakness. A cruel man may yet protect them. A weak man cannot even protect himself. And so, if fortune has robbed you of resources, let fear replace them. Let your demeanor suggest that your power lies not in coin, but in will, not in treasure, but in resolve. Men fear what they cannot measure, and a man who conceals his poverty appears immeasurable. Even scarcity can be weaponized if hidden behind spectacle. A ruler with few soldiers may display them in endless rotations, so the crowd believes the army without limit. A leader with empty vaults may host a single feast, so magnificently staged that whispers of abundance spread through the city for years. Men judge not by the whole, but by the fragments they see. If you control the fragments, you control their judgment. In every age, survival belongs not to the most virtuous, but to the most convincing. The world is not a court of justice. It is a theater of war. Men do not follow the righteous if he looks broken. They follow the ruthless who appears invincible. Poverty may gnaw at your bones, but never allow it to gnaw at your image. For once the mask cracks, the vultures descend, and no plea for sympathy will halt their wings. Therefore, in moments of ruin, your duty is not to reveal your truth, but to command the stage. Build illusions sturdier than stone. Weave stories louder than coin. Let fear outweigh pity. For pity dies in the night, but fear wakes with the dawn. And when the crowd believes you strong, they will make you strong again, supplying with their obedience what you lack in possession. Alliances, too, are governed by appearance. Men ally not with the weak, but with those who seem destined to prevail. Even if you stand on the edge of collapse, cloak yourself in inevitability. Let your allies believe that to abandon you is to abandon their own future. They do not seek loyalty, they seek advantage. And if you appear to hold advantage, even when it is illusion, they will remain chained to you. Enemies, on the other hand, are deceived most easily when you disguise scarcity as strength. They will hesitate to strike a fortress that looks impregnable, even if its walls are hollow. They will waste time in fear, in doubt, in endless calculation, while you rebuild your defenses behind the mask. War is not won only by soldiers or coin, it is won by the manipulation of perception. To never look poor is to draw the enemy into hesitation, and hesitation is often deadlier than the sword. Defeat itself can be reshaped if managed with mastery. When a ruler suffers a loss, the eyes of all turn to measure the damage. If he looks broken, the loss multiplies. Allies abandon, enemies attack, the crowd turns cold. But if he presents composure, if he appears undiminished, the same defeat may be recast as a temporary trial, even as a deliberate sacrifice. Men believe not in outcomes, but in narratives. Write the narrative of your defeat as though it were part of a larger design, and they will interpret weakness as strategy. History remembers not the truth, but the performance. Many rulers were ruined in secret long before the world believed them strong. They fell only when their image betrayed them. Others, with nothing left but the mask of authority, prolonged their reigns, rebuilt their fortunes, and turned apparent ruin into renewed conquest. Fortune is fickle, but appearances can chain her long enough for fortune to turn again. Thus, the essence of survival is control over what others see. Control it as you would control an army, for it serves as your first line of defense and your last hope of recovery. Guard it with vigilance, for a single careless display of poverty can undo years of cultivated strength. One gesture, one word, one slip of the mask, and the crowd will smell weakness, as wolves smell blood. And once they taste it, they will never forget. So the principle stands unbroken. Never look poor, even if you are. For to look poor is to accept defeat before the battle begins, to surrender authority before it is taken, to betray yourself before others betray you. To never look poor is to remain a contender, even when stripped bare, and to hold open the possibility of victory until fate itself bends back in your favor. Spectacle is the weapon by which the mask becomes invincible. Men believe more in what they witness with their eyes than in what they reason with their minds. A feast, a procession, a public act of magnificence outweighs 10 private truths of poverty. The ruler who understands this transforms scarcity into grandeur by concentrating it into moments. One display of power, carefully staged, can blind the multitude to years of decline. Ritual serves the same purpose. Repetition creates permanence in the minds of men. A leader who appears every week with the same dignity, the same poise, the same symbols, convinces the crowd that his authority is eternal, even if it rots beneath the surface. Ritual becomes a shield. As long as the performance continues, belief continues, and belief itself generates obedience. Controlled illusions are the highest art. They are not lies spoken in haste, but realities constructed through careful orchestration. The army that marches twice through the city in different attire to appear as two armies. The treasury that opens to reveal borrowed coin, displayed as though inexhaustible wealth. The emissary who whispers of distant allies, though none exist, planting in the minds of enemies a fear of invisible legions. These illusions, once believed, have the power to alter decisions, to delay attacks, to summon loyalty from those who would otherwise betray. Majesty is born not from abundance but from its simulation. The throne itself is an illusion, wood covered in gold, elevated above the crowd, transforming a man into a figure beyond reach. The crown is an illusion, metal bent into a circle, convincing the world that fate itself has chosen one head over all others. Without these symbols, power is naked. With them, even the weakest ruler appears divine. Thus, ruin can be hidden beneath majesty. A starving court can still project magnificence if its ceremonies are intact. A bankrupt kingdom can still command fear if its rituals remain unbroken. Appearances carry a weight heavier than truth, for men are ruled by impressions, not by reality. And when reality collapses, it is impressions that keep the walls from falling entirely. This is why rulers must spend as much effort cultivating the theater of their reign as the substance of it. To look poor is to forfeit the theater, to reveal backstage to the audience, and once the curtain falls, the play ends in chaos. But to guard appearances is to maintain the illusion that the stage is eternal, that the play will never cease, that the actor is the role itself. In this lies the paradox. A man may survive without wealth if he never appears poor, but he will not survive with wealth if he ever looks impoverished. The mask is stronger than the vault, and the crown is stronger than the coin. Consider the ruler who possesses but a handful of soldiers. He does not scatter them thin across the realm, for that would reveal his scarcity. Instead, he concentrates them in one place, marches them with precision through the capital, and parades them at different hours in different uniforms. The people, seeing endless rotations, believe the army without limit. The truth is hidden by the theater, and the theater becomes stronger than the battlefield itself. Or think of the merchant prince whose vaults lie hollow. Rather than confessing emptiness, he invests his last coin in one public banquet, so lavish that its memory lingers for years. Guests leave, whispering of hidden fortunes, of vaults so deep that such generosity is but a fragment. In truth, he has nothing left. Yet by orchestrating one display of abundance, he purchases years of credit, trust, and alliances. His ruin becomes the seed of his resurrection. Another, surrounded by rivals who smell weakness, spreads word of allies across the seas. None exist, yet he allows the rumor to live, feeding it with subtle hints, letters carried by couriers, coded words in council. Soon his enemies hesitate, fearing distant armies that will never march. Their caution grants him time, and time restores what wealth could not. Illusion becomes his shield until reality bends back in his favor. There was once a courtier who knew his master's coffers were empty. Instead of hiding in shame, he commissioned a single ornate carriage with borrowed funds. Each morning he rode it through the crowded avenues, dressed in calm dignity, never rushing, never pleading. The city assumed his fortune vast, for only the secure move so slowly. Opportunities came to him, not because he possessed wealth, but because he appeared immune to urgency. Even in war, commanders have conjured armies from shadows. A small force lights countless fires at night, each flame suggesting a company. Scouts report vast legions where only dozens exist. The enemy, deceived by the image, retreats rather than engage. A battle is won without swords drawn because poverty was concealed by brilliance. Thus examples multiply across ages. The bankrupt king who minted new coins from base metal but gilded them in ceremony, so the people treated them as gold. The exile who returned to his city with only a retinue of loyal men, but entered in such grandeur that the gates opened as if for a conquering army. The diplomat who carried himself with such composure that foreign courts mistook his weakness for deliberate restraint, and thus offered concessions freely. In every case, survival did not spring from wealth itself, but from the mastery of appearances. Scarcity was transformed into strength, ruin into opportunity, through the careful choreography of spectacle. Those who failed to master this art fell swiftly, abandoned by allies, consumed by enemies, remembered only as warnings. Silence is the first weapon, for words betray more than they protect. The poor man speaks often, hoping to justify himself, to win pity, to ease his hunger with explanation. Yet every word reveals desperation, and desperation stinks louder than truth. The ruler who understands this allows silence to cloak his weakness. He speaks rarely, so that each word weighs more than gold. His silence forces others to imagine hidden strength, unseen reserves, secret plans. What they cannot know, they fear. What they cannot measure, they respect. Selective generosity is another instrument. When resources are scarce, scatter them and they vanish, concentrate them and they magnify. A single gift, bestowed with ceremony upon the right ally, outweighs 100 small favors. Men forget the crumbs, they remember the feast. The ruler who gives, rarely but magnificently, creates the illusion of abundance. Even if he spends his last coin, the memory of his largesse buys loyalty long after the coin is gone. To appear careless in generosity is to appear secure, for only the strong can afford to give without fear. Controlled cruelty hardens the mask when wealth cannot. A man who cannot reward must still command. He does so by instilling fear through precise displays of severity. Not cruelty poured out in chaos that breeds revolt, but cruelty measured, deliberate, unforgettable. The official who betrays him is punished not in secret, but before the eyes of all. his fate becoming a warning carved into memory. Thus, even in scarcity, the ruler appears untouchable. Men say, he may lack gold, but he does not lack power. Fear becomes the currency where coin has failed. In some courts, a prince stripped of funds used silence to mask his debts. He walked among nobles without speaking of hardship, yet his bearing suggested hidden reserves. They lent him coin, not because he asked, but because his silence suggested he did not need it. Another ruler, with coffers drained, gave a single grand feast for the city. The wine was watered, the bread stretched, but the spectacle was so well staged that the people remembered only the abundance. He bought years of loyalty with a single night's illusion. A third, facing ruin, punished a traitor so brutally that no one dared question his power. His enemies whispered of his cruelty, but none dared exploit his poverty. Silence preserves mystery. Generosity sustains loyalty. Cruelty enforces fear. Together they create a fortress stronger than walls, one built not of stone but of perception. And while fortune may strip away armies, lands, and coin, it cannot strip away appearances unless the ruler himself allows them to falter. To never look poor, even when you are, is to understand that power is maintained in the imagination of others. Poverty in appearance is not merely the absence of wealth, it is the admission of defeat, the silent confession that you can be displaced. The ruler who allows himself to look poor grants permission for others to treat him as already fallen. From that moment, his words lose weight, his commands lose force, and his alliances dissolve. The essence of survival lies in projecting inevitability. A man who seems rich in strength, even if he is hollow within, imposes the belief that he cannot be overturned. This belief becomes a shield, and often it becomes reality itself. For when men assume you cannot be broken, they cease to attempt it. To look poor is to invite every rival to test your limits. To look strong is to dissuade them before they act. Appearance dictates hierarchy. In the struggle for influence, men instinctively rank themselves beneath those who project power and above those who reveal weakness. If you look poor, you sink in this invisible order, and others rise upon your decline. If you look secure, you anchor yourself in a higher place, and men defer to you even against their private doubts. In this way, perception precedes truth and shapes it. Never looking poor also preserves your independence. Once others believe you weak, they begin to bind you with conditions, obligations, and humiliations. They will grant aid only to chain you. But if you appear strong, even when empty-handed, they approach you with caution, offering terms more favorable, fearing to insult what they believe to be your hidden strength. Looking poor invites domination. Looking unshaken secures autonomy. At its core, this is not vanity but necessity. The theater of power demands constant vigilance, for men are guided less by facts than by impressions. Your true condition is irrelevant if your image convinces them otherwise. The mask is not a lie. It is the shield that preserves your place in a world that punishes honesty. And so, you must never look poor, because the moment you do, you have already surrendered the ground upon which all authority stands. To maintain the image of strength is not indulgence, but survival. The man who neglects it believes he can rest upon truth alone, yet truth without perception is powerless. Authority rests not on what you are, but on what others believe you to be. Once their belief falters, you are dethroned before a sword is ever raised. This discipline requires vigilance in every detail. A careless gesture, a single appearance of desperation can unravel years of cultivated strength. Men do not need proof to withdraw their loyalty. Suspicion alone is enough. They are like water, flowing toward whatever seems highest, abandoning the low ground without reflection. Thus, you must live as if every eye is upon you, because in politics it always is. To never look poor is to control time itself. The mask of strength buys you delay, and delay is often victory. Rivals hesitate, allies hold their faith, the people continue their obedience. Every day preserved by appearances is a day in which fortune may shift, and fortune is fickle. She abandons the desperate, but she often returns to those who endure. Looking poor closes the door to her return. Looking strong leaves it open. It is also a form of command over yourself. Poverty in spirit is worse than poverty in possession, and to look poor is to admit surrender inwardly before it is ever seen outwardly. To preserve dignity, even when stripped of everything else, is to deny the world access to your defeat. As long as you do not reveal it, defeat remains incomplete. Therefore, the discipline of never looking poor is not about vanity, but about power's endurance. It separates those who are consumed by circumstance from those who bend circumstance back to their will. For the crowd obeys only what it perceives as strong, and strength exists first in the theater of the mind. This principle extends beyond the prince and into every sphere where men contend for influence. The individual who looks poor invites neglect, just as the state that appears weak invites invasion. Nations collapse not only when their treasuries are empty, but when their posture reveals emptiness. The moment a country projects instability, its rivals move against it, its allies distance themselves, and its people lose faith. What is true of a man is amplified in the fate of empires. In commerce, the merchant who looks poor forfeits trust. Partners assume his credit is failing, and competitors strike before he can recover. Trade thrives on confidence, not merely on goods, and once confidence is broken, transactions die. The marketplace, like the court, rewards projection over confession. To look stable, even in decline, is to preserve the flow of opportunity. In diplomacy, the state that never looks poor holds the advantage, even when its resources are strained. Its envoys negotiate from a position of presumed strength, extracting terms that a candid revelation of weakness would forfeit. Rivals hesitate to test it, unsure of what hidden reserves it may possess. The mask of abundance preserves autonomy where honesty would bring chains. Even in private life, the principle holds. Among men, respect is granted to those who appear secure. Friends, neighbors, and allies treat the one who looks poor as a burden, while they treat the one who appears unshaken as a source of stability. Poverty revealed breeds isolation, but dignity maintained commands continued regard. The stage may be smaller than that of princes and nations, yet the rule is the same. Appearance governs treatment. Thus, the discipline of never looking poor is universal. It belongs to the man, the ruler, the state, and the civilization. It is not deception in its petty sense, but the recognition that survival depends on the impressions others form, and impressions are shaped not by truth but by presentation. To guard this image is to guard existence itself. Once vigilance breaks, collapse begins. The mask of strength is not tolerant of cracks, for men are quick to seize upon any sign of weakness. A single display of poverty, after years of apparent power, is enough to dissolve loyalty that once seemed unshakable. The crowd remembers not your long record of strength, but the one moment you faltered. They forgive cruelty, they forgive arrogance, but they do not forgive weakness. The danger lies in the swiftness of this reversal. What takes years to build can vanish in a single instant. The ally who stood beside you yesterday turns indifferent today, calculating that your end is certain. The rival who hesitated to strike now advances with confidence, assured that fortune has already abandoned you. The people who once shouted your name lower their voices and begin to whisper of successors. To look poor even once is to set fire to the foundation of your authority, and the decline feeds upon itself. Once suspicion of your weakness spreads, men begin to act as if it were fact. Each act of doubt reinforces the appearance of ruin, and each appearance of ruin strengthens doubt. The cycle becomes self-fulfilling, and what was once only perception hardens into reality. The state that looks weak becomes weak. The leader who appears impoverished becomes powerless. The man who shows himself needy becomes dependent. This is why vigilance must be constant. There is no rest, no reprieve, no moment when one can allow the mask to slip. Power is a stage without curtains, and the audience never disperses. The eyes that watch you in triumph are the same eyes that search for cracks in your defeat. To never look poor is not an occasional act. It is a way of being, a permanent discipline, a second skin that cannot be removed without consequence. And so, the lesson hardens. You must never look poor, not once, not for a moment. For the instant you do, Your enemies gather, your allies waver, and your people prepare your replacement. Power does not die with a blade, it dies the moment you appear unworthy to hold it. The burden of never looking poor is heavier than the poverty itself, for poverty touches the body, but appearances consume the soul. To live without coin is hardship, but to live without the freedom to reveal weakness is exile within one's own skin. The ruler who bears this mask must understand. He will never rest fully, never show himself unguarded, never allow the world to glimpse what lies beneath. His survival demands it. This discipline reshapes the man. He learns to silence impulses, to bury complaints, to restrain gestures that betray fatigue. Even in solitude, he practices strength, for habits formed in private leak into public life. The mask fuses with his being until it is no longer a disguise but a second nature. In this transformation, he loses the luxury of honesty, but he gains the endurance of command. The soul, however, pays a price. To never look poor means to carry distance in every relationship. No ally can be fully trusted with the truth, for truth becomes a weapon in their hand. No friend can be fully embraced, for friendship demands vulnerability. No family can be fully confided in, for the cracks revealed in intimacy may one day spread into public exposure. The man who never looks poor lives surrounded, yet alone. And yet, this solitude grants clarity. Detached from the comfort of confession, he sees human nature without illusion. He recognizes that men do not love the weak, they do not honor the needy, they do not follow the destitute. He accepts the cruelty of this truth, and by accepting it, he masters it. His soul hardens, not into stone, but into something sharper, an instrument capable of cutting through pity and forging survival. Over time, the mask ceases to feel like a burden and becomes the ruler's true face. The effort no longer exhausts him, because he understands that it is not deception but necessity. To never look poor is not a performance, it is the condition of power itself. And he who embraces it, though denied softness, is granted endurance. Thus, the man who refuses to appear poor becomes a creature apart. He sacrifices the ease of honesty for the permanence of authority. He carries loneliness, but commands loyalty. He bears silence, but projects inevitability. He loses the comfort of being seen, but gains the strength of being obeyed. When the mask of strength fuses with the man, it ceases to be an act and becomes his prison. He cannot remove it without destroying the foundation on which all authority rests. To abandon it would be to invite the vultures, to hand over the weapon that has kept him alive. Thus he is bound to it, as a soldier is bound to his armor. It protects him, yet it also weighs upon him, shaping his movements, limiting his freedom, making him something other than he once was. The mask dictates his destiny. Every gesture must be measured, every silence calculated, every presence arranged. Even moments of private despair are moderated, for habit does not allow him to collapse, even when unseen. Over time, he ceases to know the difference between the man within and the image without. The mask is no longer an outer shell, it is the only face he possesses. This transformation brings mastery, for he can no longer betray himself. His bearing never falters, his tone never reveals doubt, his presence never signals weakness. Those around him, whether ally or enemy, cannot pierce the image he has become. In this way, the mask makes him untouchable. His endurance outlasts fortune itself, for when wealth and strength vanish, appearances still hold, and appearances alone sustain obedience until reality shifts once more. Yet this mastery is also captivity. The man who never looks poor loses the right to be human. He cannot confess hunger, cannot admit fatigue, cannot ask for help. To do so would break the spell, and once broken, it cannot be restored. He must be sufficient unto himself, drawing from the performance the very strength that the world demands of him. He is alone, not by accident, but by design. Still, it is in this solitude that true command is forged. He becomes something more than a man, a symbol, an embodiment of stability, a figure that others lean upon because he allows no crack in the edifice. His destiny is not to be loved, nor to be understood, but to be obeyed. The mask grants him this, at the cost of everything else. To never look poor, then, is not merely a tactic of survival, it is the final shape of power. It transforms weakness into strength, illusion into reality, man into ruler. And once accepted, it cannot be set aside, for to remove it would be to remove the very condition of command. Once the mask is no longer a shield but his very flesh, the ruler begins to wield it as a weapon, not only to endure, but to bend events to his design. What began as concealment becomes command. He learns to project abundance so convincingly that others alter their actions in anticipation of his strength. Rivals yield ground, allies offer favors, the people align their hopes with him, not because of what he possesses, but because of what they believe he possesses. The mask, internalized, becomes a tool for reshaping the world. Fortune, though fickle, is not immune to this influence. She tilts toward those who appear most prepared to hold her. Men of hesitation lose her, men of display attract her, for she is drawn to boldness. The ruler who never looks poor, even when stripped bare, summons fortune back to his side, because men act as though he already has her. Their obedience, their fear, their loyalty, all born of appearances, generate the very strength that reality once denied him. In this way, illusion manufactures fact, and the mask dictates destiny. The fate of those who serve him is equally reshaped. His allies bind themselves tighter, fearing to be left behind by a figure who seems unbreakable. His enemies waste their strength plotting against a man they believe far stronger than he is, bleeding themselves out in hesitation and miscalculation. His subjects, desiring stability above all, cling to the figure who radiates it. In their submission, they supply him with resources, labor, and obedience that transform appearances into substance. Thus, by never looking poor, he turns the belief of others into his true wealth. Over time, the mask ceases to be reactive and becomes creative. He does not merely conceal poverty, he uses the illusion of strength to set traps, to dictate terms, to write the script of conflicts before they unfold. He becomes the playwright of power, while others, deceived by his image, play the roles he has assigned. The man who once fought to survive through appearances now commands through them, bending both men and fortune into instruments of his will. And so the principle reaches its highest form. To never look poor, even if you are, is not only survival, it is the art of turning perception into reality, fear into loyalty, illusion into fact. It is the alchemy by which weakness becomes strength, and through which the solitary man, stripped of all else, still governs the stage of history. When the principle is perfected, it evolves into a cycle so seamless that no one can distinguish mask from substance. Appearance sustains power, power sustains reality, and reality, once reshaped, strengthens appearance in return. The illusion that began as survival becomes indistinguishable from fact, for men act on what they believe, and their actions construct the very truth they imagined. A ruler who never looks poor becomes the center of gravity around which all else turns. His image of stability attracts loyalty, and loyalty provides him with resources. Those resources confirm the image of stability, which attracts still greater loyalty. What once was pretense becomes fact through repetition and reinforcement. In this cycle, appearances are no longer fragile illusions but hardened realities, indistinguishable from fate itself. The same occurs in states and nations. A country that projects strength, even when hollow, receives trade, alliances, and deference. These gifts, born from belief, restore its actual strength. The image of prosperity becomes the substance of prosperity. Conversely, a state that looks weak, even if strong in truth, sees its alliances vanish, its enemies emboldened, its wealth eroded. Its hidden abundance cannot save it, for men react to what they see, not to what lies unseen. In time, this cycle produces inevitability. The ruler who masters it no longer fears exposure because there is nothing left to expose. The mask has fused with the man, and belief has hardened into fact. Those who once whispered of poverty now whisper of inexhaustible wealth. Those who once doubted his strength now repeat stories of his invincibility. What was once staged theater becomes accepted history. This cycle is both crown and chain. It secures his command beyond ordinary limits, yet it binds him to the performance forever. To falter even once is to shatter the equilibrium, to undo the harmony between appearance and reality. He must feed the cycle without end, for it is the current that carries him forward, and to step out of it is to be drowned. Thus, the discipline of never looking poor evolves into a law of power itself. Perception creates action. Action creates reality. Reality reinforces perception. The ruler who commands appearances commands the entire circle, bending both men and fortune into obedience. In this way, survival becomes supremacy, and supremacy becomes destiny. Wealth itself, when viewed through this law, is revealed as secondary. Gold, land, and armies are instruments, but they are not the essence of power. They can be lost in a season, stolen in a night, squandered by betrayal, or consumed by war. Possession is fragile. Perception endures. A ruler who has wealth but looks poor is already halfway dethroned. A ruler who has nothing but appears rich still commands the obedience of those who believe. The true currency of power is belief. Gold may purchase weapons, but belief arms them. Land may feed men, but belief moves them. Armies may exist in numbers, but belief determines whether they fight or flee. To command perception is to command the spirit of men, and the spirit directs matter. That is why rulers rise not because of what they own, but because of what they make others believe they own. Thus, mastery of appearances is mastery of power itself. Wealth without this mastery is a treasure chest in an open field, visible, vulnerable, destined to be looted. But the appearance of wealth, even without substance, is a fortress intangible, unassailable, preserved by the imagination of others. The ruler who understands this does not waste himself chasing possessions. He cultivates impressions, for impressions are inexhaustible, and once established, they multiply themselves. This is why to never look poor is more vital than to never be poor. Being poor is a condition of circumstance, but looking poor is a choice of presentation. Fortune governs the first, discipline governs the second, and discipline outlasts fortune, bending her back toward those who master it. In the hierarchy of power, perception sits above possession. Men obey not because you hold coin in your hand, but because they believe you can provide it tomorrow. They follow not because your armies are infinite, but because they believe they are. They kneel not because you are invulnerable, but because you seem to be. Their belief becomes the foundation upon which your reality is built. And so, the man who never looks poor, even when stripped to nothing, commands more securely than the one who clings to wealth without guarding appearances. For wealth is a shadow that fades. Perception is the sun that casts it. He who masters the sun dictates the length, shape, and destiny of the shadow itself. To grasp the essence of power is to accept that survival belongs not to those who are, but to those who appear. The world does not wait for truth to reveal itself. It reacts to impressions in the moment, and those impressions become the truth that shapes events. The man who never looks poor, even when stripped of everything, holds authority because he denies others the satisfaction of seeing his ruin. He commands by refusing to confess defeat, by refusing to display need, by refusing to surrender the mask that sustains him. In this theater of human affairs, appearances are not ornaments, they are armor. They do not decorate power, they preserve it. The moment you allow yourself to look poor, you announce to the world that you can be conquered. Allies prepare to leave, enemies prepare to strike, and the people prepare to forget you. But if you maintain the bearing of strength, the aura of wealth, the composure of certainty, you buy time. Time for fortune to turn, time for enemies to falter, time for reality to be reshaped by belief. This is the cruel arithmetic of power. It is safer to be feared than pitied, safer to be envied than ignored, safer to look strong in poverty than to look poor in plenty. For men will always prefer the comfort of following strength to the discomfort of embracing weakness. They cannot help it. Their instincts are tuned to survival, and survival demands deference to the figure who appears unshaken. Thus, the discipline of never looking poor is not vanity. It is the very foundation of command. It is the shield against betrayal, the magnet of loyalty, the engine of fear, and the mask that turns illusion into reality. To discard it, even once, is to surrender all at once. To guard it relentlessly is to keep the door of destiny open, no matter how violently fortune has slammed it shut. So hold the mask with unbroken hands. Carry yourself with the dignity of abundance, even when your coffers are empty. Walk as though the ground obeys you. Speak as though silence waits for your command, and rule as though your reign is eternal. For in the end, the world will not remember what you possessed, but what you projected. And if you never looked poor, they will never dare to call you defeated.